بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وافضل الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أجمعين. Okay, inshallah, let's go to Al-Baqarah, verse 187. Verse 187. بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. أحل لكم ليلة الصيام الرفث إلى نسائكم هن لباس لكم وأنتم لباس لهن. علم الله أنكم كنتم تختانون أنفسكم فتاب عليكم وعفى عنكم فالآن باشروهن وابتغوا ما كتب الله لكم وكلوا واشربوا حتى يتبين لكم الخيط الأبيض من الخيط الأسود من الفجر ثم أتموا الصيام إلى الليل ولا تباشروهن وأنتم عاكفون في المساجد تلك حدود الله فلا تقربوها كذلك يبين الله آياته للناس لعلهم يتقون. Okay, long ayah. Lots of ahkam. Here, verse 187, it has been made lawful for you to go to your wives during the nights of the fast. They are a garment for you when you are their garment. Allah knows that you used to betray yourselves, and He mercifully relented and pardoned you. So you may now associate intimately with your wives and benefit from the enjoyment Allah has made lawful for you, and eat and drink at night until you can discern the white streak of dawn against the blackness of the night. Then give that up and complete your fasting until night sets in. But do not associate intimately with your wives during the period when you are in retreat in the mosques. These are the bounds set by Allah. Do not then even draw near them. Thus does Allah make His signs clear to humankind that they may stay away from evil. Okay, here verse 187 starts with, in the Arabic, وَحِلَّ لَكُمْ, right? It's saying that it has been made halal for you. Uhilla from halal, right? It has been made halal for you. What does this imply? This implies that previously it was something forbidden, which is only now being made halal. So this verse 187 is actually an abrogation of a previous command, which was that of prohibition. So previously, when fasting was first instituted in Islam, after you fell asleep at night and woke up, you could not eat or drink or have relations with their spouses. So this was initially when someone became fard. So what happened was that there's actually a report by Mu'adh bin Jabal radiallahu anhu, one of the Sahaba. He reports that they used to eat, drink, and go to their spouses as long as they did not sleep. But if they fell asleep, they wouldn't indulge in any of these things. So this was prohibited. One day what happened, what led to the change of the command by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that a man from the Ansar, his name was Qais bin Simra. He was Qais bin Simra, and he had a hard labor job. So he was fasting and working very hard, and when he came home, and it was time to break the fast, his wife had no food at home. So, seeing his state, she said, okay, let me try to see if I can go out and find something for you. So by the time she came back, he had fallen asleep after having prayed Isha without eating or drinking anything. And he didn't wake up until the next morning. And because he had fallen asleep, he couldn't eat anything because this is what the hukum was in the beginning. So he had to fast the next day again without having broken his fast the night before. And by afternoon of the next day, he fainted. So this was one situation that occurred from the hurma prohibition of not being able to eat or drink after waking up in the night. What happened also with some Muslims, some of the Sahaba, they were actually going to their wives after even taking a nap because it was just too difficult for them to not have relations all day and then even at night to not be able to do that. So some of them were just doing it, kind of feeling guilty about it, but still doing it. So then one Sahabi came to the Prophet ﷺ and said that, okay, I took a nap and this happened. So subhanAllah, after that, this verse was revealed. That we have made halal for you going to your spouses in the nights of Ramadan. And this is actually a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because it would have been too difficult to have gone through the whole month in that state. So, and also, Allah mentions here that you were trying to deceive yourself, you were trying to trick yourself, going but feeling guilty about it, doing with the guilty conscience. And Allah alludes to this, وَكُنْتُمْ عَلِمَ اللَّهُ أَنَّكُمْ كُنْتُمْ تَخْتَانُونَ أَنفُسَكُمْ. Allah knows that you were trying to deceive yourselves, trying to be dishonest towards yourselves. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't want them to have to do that with a guilty conscience. He made it halal so that they could indulge without developing this guilty criminal mindset that you keep doing something wrong and you kind of subhanAllah, indulge in it because of your weakness. So he wanted them to be able to do it without feeling guilty. So he made it halal, subhanAllah. Now here, the analogy given is a very beautiful analogy. People talk about this. The reason, one of the things mentioned about going to your spouse is that they are a garment for you and you are a garment for them. This is a lovely analogy, the analogy of clothing, because there is nothing that is closer to the human being, to the person physically, than what they're wearing. There's no barrier between the person and their skin and the cloth that is on that skin. So this is the closest, possible contact you can have with something, is your garment. And subhanAllah, this is the description of the marital bond, that this is as close as it gets. It's not going to be, subhanAllah, there's no other bond that has this level of intimacy, closeness, companionship that the marital bond, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala recognizes that and facilitated that in the nights of Ramadan. Number two, what does clothing do for you? It also protects you, right? From the heat in the summer months, from the cold in the winter months, right? And this is also, your spouses are also protection for us from haram. They are our means for being protected from falling into anything unlawful. Alhamdulillah, we have a halal means to fulfill our natural desires. Number three, what does clothing do? It beautifies us, right? It makes us look better than we would, especially if someone, is not pleased with their appearance. Then covering yourself will actually increase to your beauty. So it's a beautification. And this is the same thing with the spouse, subhanAllah. The marriage, no doubt, a good marriage increases the beauty in your life. This is no doubt to be true. And the last thing that we can think of that clothing does is it covers also your faults, right? Covers up whatever deficiencies you may have, any scars, any ugly moles, in certain places. They get covered up with the clothing. And this is exactly what a good spouse should do for the other, is, make up for their deficiencies. Wherever one has a weakness, to try to become the strength for the relationship in that department. And also to cover up their faults in front of other people. Not to, complain about your spouses in front of your family. This is a very, it's undignified behavior. Our purpose is to cover for them, and they should cover for us. And if they don't, we can gently educate them through this verse, inshallah. Okay, the next part talks about eating and drinking. So first, the relations have been dealt with, which were previously haram, now they have become halal. Now, previously eating and drinking had been haram even in the night after that nap. And now it has also become halal. In fact, it became so halal that Allah actually made the eating at night, even if you had taken a nap, to eat during the last part of the night, He made that a sunnah. Because to maximize the benefit of that food for you during the day when you're fasting, it is sunnah to delay the suhoor. Okay, so subhanAllah, it is sunnah to hasten to quickly open your fast at iftar time, but to delay the suhoor before the dawn. This is out of the ease that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prescribed for us. So the new law totally abrogated the old law to the point that eating towards the end of the night actually became a sunnah that we now call suhoor. And subhanAllah, it's an act we actually are rewarded for. We're eating our paratha or whatever, and we're actually getting a reward for that. And that's amazing. So always try to remember the dua and be conscious of that. It doesn't mean you overeat. It's just that while you're taking suhoor, because it's a sunnah, the angels are praying for you at that time. So again, it's just the beauty of the deen and its laws is just mind-blowing. Now, one thing I do want to draw your attention to is that you will not find in the entire Qur'an the prohibition that initially established that eating and drinking and intercourse were haram in the nights of Ramadan if you fell asleep. You will not find that anywhere in the Qur'an. You only have the current law, which is that it's halal. You don't have the abrogated law, like you have in other instances. In the Qur'an, you have the previous law. Like remember yesterday, we talked about the wasiyah, that you had to leave for the parents and the close of kin. that is an example of the preservation of an abrogated law in the script of the Qur'an, as we have today, preserved. We have the abrogated law as well as the one that takes its place, which is in Surah An-Nisa, the inheritance shares. However, here is an example of the presence of only the new law that is in effect. The abrogated law was from the Sunnah. It is not mentioned in the Qur'an. This is a very important usul al-fiqh point for those of you who may or may not have had exposure to the study of usul al-fiqh. What this proves to us is that the Sunnah has as much legislative authority as the Qur'an. Yani the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, which established that it was haram, that was being implemented, that was in effect as much as the Qur'an is now in effect. There was no difference in terms of the power of implementing that. And both at that time, it would have been a sin to indulge in it, just like it would be a sin to indulge in something the Qur'an makes haram. And just like it's a reward in doing something the Sunnah encourages, just as there is a reward in doing what the Qur'an encourages. So in terms of legislation, in terms of power implementation, in terms of sin and reward, the Qur'an and Sunnah are equal in their legislative authority. So that's a very important sort of point to keep in mind that we can derive from this example. Okay, now what is the khayt al-abyad min al-khayt al-aswad, right? How do you know that dawn has set in, right? That's when you're allowed to eat up until. So here it's it's explained as eat and drink at night until you can discern the white streak of dawn against the blackness of the night. What is dawn? Dawn is the first break of daylight. Okay, the first break of daylight. This is the dawn, and there is a false dawn that occurs in the night. And this verse is not referring to that false dawn. The false dawn has looks like it's about to turn morning, but then it gets dark again. That's the false dawn. This is talking about the true dawn, which when the first light breaks, it is followed by increased light. That's the true dawn. Okay, when the lightness continues to increase, that's considered the true dawn, and this is what is being referred to in the verse. And once you are sure that the true dawn has set in, that it has personally become unlawful for you, haram for you to eat beyond that point. Once you are sure that it is suhoor, its suhoor time is ended. Now, in this case, I mentioned at the end, about the hudud of Allah, that these are the boundaries set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do not even go near them. In this case of eating and drinking at night in Ramadan before dawn, the hudud for the suhoor is the dawn. Okay, that's the had for eating and drinking. So, فَلَا تَقْرَبُوا, don't even go near it. Make sure that you don't go over that time even by a minute. Because if the true dawn has set in, eating beyond it is going to invalidate your fast. So be very, very careful. And of course you go until, it says, وَأَتِمُّوا الصِّيَامَ إِلَى اللَّيْلِ, and complete the sawm until layl, until the night. Some sects have taken this as a reason or proof for delaying their iftar beyond Maghrib. Because they say the word in the Qur'an is layl, it's night. Maghrib is not night. Well, you have to understand that the prayers or the time of prayers are divided into we have day prayers and night prayers. We have the prayers of the day are Dhuhr and Asr, right? And the prayers of the night are Maghrib and Isha. Maghrib marks the beginning of the night. Islamically, once Maghrib sets in, it's considered the next day, or the night has begun. So this is why we pray Tarawih the night before the first day of fasting, right? Because this marks the beginning of the night. This is why when we start reciting the Qur'an, the khatmah, when we want to finish reciting the Qur'an, when do we start it? As soon as it is established that tomorrow is Ramadan. For example, we started fasting on Friday. We found out Thursday in the daytime, at around Dhuhr or Asr, we were getting information that tomorrow is going to be the first of Ramadan, right? So what did we do? As soon as Maghrib came in, that's when we started reading our Musaf. That's when, the race begins. So it's really Maghrib that starts gets you into the month, starts the next day. This is the beginning of the night. So there's no justification delaying the iftar for people who say that Maghrib is not night. It is. It's not as dark as Isha yet, but it's not daytime anymore. So this is what Allah is referring to, that you break your fast at the time of sunset. Now, the system that Allah established, why do we have, we have to look at the sun or the moon or, times of dawn and sunset? Because Islam is beyond having to need a clock or an iPhone, to be able to complete your ibadat. You can't, you might be in a situation where you don't have access to these tools. You should be able to fast anywhere. You should be able to pray anywhere, just by looking at the sun. And subhanAllah, there are people who actually, parts of the world that actually still rely on those methods. For example, in the Arctic region, where it's very difficult to tell if it's even day or night, subhanAllah, for someone like us, we would be able to know. And their days, their nights are, they have a very different timetable in terms of day and night. It's not equally balanced out the way we have. But even they are able to use the signs from the sky to be able to estimate that, okay, now it's time for this prayer, or it is time for this, for iftar or suhoor. So Allah established the system so that it's applicable in all times and places. That's the point. It doesn't require clocks, because they didn't have those at the time anyway for Salah, for Siyam. So it's clear signs in the sky. So polar regions like the Arctic Circle, they just use the sky to determine the morning, evening, and even midnight. Okay, so we get into the night with sunset as darkness, and then we break our fast, and we're allowed to eat until it's suhoor, and then it's haram to fast beyond that. I want to eat beyond that. I want to clarify one thing. I don't know if you've heard, there's a popular misconception we have been hearing for the past few years about continuing to eat suhoor even after the adhan is heard. Anybody familiar? Heard this before? That you should continue to eat whatever you're eating, just to finish up quickly, even if the adhan is called. Keep eating. I have heard this, and people do believe that this is correct, and actually this is based on relating a portion of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. However, when you hear the entire text of the hadith, it will become clear to you that you cannot do that. So I want to give you the hadith in case someone asks you about it. The hadith, the meaning of the hadith is the Prophet ﷺ said the adhan of Bilal should not stop you from eating suhoor, because he calls the adhan well ahead in the night. They just take this part that the adhan of Bilal should not stop you from eating suhoor. They take this part and say, well, the Prophet said, even if the adhan is called, you should still keep eating suhoor. That would be fine if you go on to read, you understand what it really means, because it says you should not stop from eating suhoor, because he calls the adhan well ahead in the night. He doesn't call it at dawn. You just call it earlier, to wake up the people, or they can pray nawafil, or just to make them alert. Therefore, continue eating and drinking even after having heard Bilal's adhan until you hear the adhan of Ibn Maktoum, because he calls the adhan exactly at the time of dawn. So this hadith makes it very clear that you can keep eating, not because the adhan says you can keep eating, but because that adhan was not called at the time of dawn. The second adhan was called at the time of dawn, and actually this hadith proves that you can't eat after the adhan. So if someone wakes up and the adhan is being called, they cannot eat. They can't think, let me just put a date in my mouth to drink water. That's it.
The moment it starts?
The moment the adhan starts. Because you can't call the adhan until the time sets in. Once the time sets in, it is dawn, then it's over.
What is
from the beginning of the adhan.
When we break fast?
The adhan of Maghrib, you just have to be very careful, because we don't have the real adhan being called in the masajid. You have to be very sure that this adhan is the right time for my locality, because every locality has a slightly different time for sunset. For example, ours from New York City even differs a little bit. When I go to Jersey City, which is only 35 minutes from here, there's a 2-minute time difference in some of the salawat. So you have to be careful. Make sure that check if 2 or 3, just to make sure, and go with the latest one to be on the safe side.
I see people eating like kajur during the adhan.
Yes, you can, because once they say Allahu Akbar, the time is coming, so you can. You just have to. If you're not in the masjid, if you're at home, then make sure. If you're in the masjid, the adhan marks the entering of Maghrib. You don't have to wait for the masjid. Okay, the next is do not associate intimately with your wife during the period when you are on retreat in the mosque, in i'tikaf. I'tikaf literally means to stay somewhere in seclusion, to stay somewhere by yourself, to isolate yourself. That's literally what i'tikaf is, to stay, to be in a place in seclusion. So that's a literal meaning. Islamically, of course, it's a special voluntary ibadah that people do in the last 10 nights. It is sunnah to do in the last 10 nights of Ramadan. And it has certain conditions. For example, it should be in the masjid, especially for men. And you should not leave the masjid except for extreme necessity. Okay, one has to stay there. And this meaning of having to stay in the masjid is actually packaged with the literal word i'tikaf itself, because it literally means to seclude yourself. And so here, again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ends with this, تِلْكَ حُدُودُ اللَّهِ فَلَا تَقْرَبُوهَا. These are the hudud of Allah, so do not even go near them. So again, that caution. Make sure, out of caution, you want to stop eating a couple minutes before suhoor. Make sure, out of caution, you're sure that Maghrib has set in. Okay. So out of caution, make sure you don't have relations in the daytime. Like, don't even go near those things that can get you into trouble. And this happened, of course, in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, right? The incident of the Sahabi who actually came to the Prophet in a very flustered, panic state, and said that, I'm ruined, I'm destroyed. And the Prophet ﷺ said, what happened? And he said that I had relations with my wife on the day of Ramadan. Obviously, this is a very serious situation. So the punishment or expiation for that is that you have to fast 2 consecutive months, 60 days, without breaking. If you break one day, you have to start from zero all over again. So Prophet told him this, and he said, I couldn't even make it through one day, I'm going to fast 60 days. So then the Prophet said, give him other options. Then, okay, why don't you free a slave? He didn't have access to that. He's like, okay, why don't you give sadaqah? And he's like, to the poor. And he said, there's no one more poor than me. So the Prophet said, okay, why don't you give, eat the sadaqah yourself, and inshallah it'll be fine. So subhanAllah, this is the...
Once you fast, I did that. And if I had to do 60 days fast, what I'm going to do, how can I control myself?
Yes, subhanAllah. So you see, this also shows not just the mercy of the Prophet ﷺ, but how approachable he was. He didn't have this stern, very strict, unapproachable, harsh, appearance or impression on the people. They were very excited. I'm sorry, but just for the recording, if you could just keep the questions in, I apologize. But please write your questions down so that I can definitely address them at the end. I will leave some time, inshallah, for the end. So this is very important, that we be approachable to people. Just because someone is more practicing than another, their manner should not put off people, so that people who feel more sinful than them can never come and talk to them and benefit from what they have to offer. Because if the sinful stay away from those people that can help them, they're never going to be helped. And that sin and corruption or fasad is never going to go away. So very important to remain approachable, inshallah. Anyhow, I was not intending to go into that. So again, the hadith we mentioned yesterday, لِكُلِّ مَلِكٍ حِمَا وَحِمَا اللَّهِ مَحَارِمُهُ, right? That for every malik, for every king, there is a boundary. And the boundaries of Allah are the maharim, the things that He has made haram. Do not go near them. And this is why while you're fasting in the daytime, you should not go overboard in gargling. Because if you do it too much, you might ingest some water. So this is one of the examples of, just being careful, not فَلَا تَقْرَبُوا, don't even go near that which will possibly lead to you. Someone who cannot control themselves, with their spouse, for example, they should not do the preliminaries either, because that might lead to, unless someone can really control themselves, But some ulama have considered it makruh to go near that. Okay, let's go on to 188. ولا تأكلوا أموالكم بينكم بالباطل وتدلوا بها إلى الحكام لتأكلوا فريقا من أموال الناس بالإثم وأنتم تعلمون. Do not usurp one another's possessions by false means, nor proffer your possessions to the authorities, so that you may sinfully and knowingly usurp a portion of another's possessions. Okay, now the discourse goes to not eating each other's wealth or property unlawfully. The verse 187 is just talking about eating and drinking, how that's haram in the daytime, And if you fast from the halal in the day, then how can you break your fast with the haram, with the property of someone else, with the unlawful wealth that you get from other people? So this is talking about unlawfully acquiring anything, whatever it is, whether it's food or land or money, property, jewelry, anything. That how can you, after you have fasted the whole day and not even gone near the halal, which is normally halal, how can you then break your fast or indulge in things that are haram or benefit from those things that are haram? So this is a prohibition on not taking anyone's property unlawfully, not bribing the judges, not taking your case to court while knowing you are wrong, just because of the confidence that you have that I'll be able to falsely prove my case through my eloquence or witnesses, false witnesses, etc. There was actually a land dispute between two Sahaba, and the plaintiff brought his case to the Prophet ﷺ. So the Islamic way of dealing with that, because the plaintiff had no witnesses. So if you have no witnesses, then the defendant on the other side has to swear an oath by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Prophet ﷺ asked him to give an oath, to swear an oath. And he was about to take the oath, but before that, the Prophet ﷺ recited to him the following verse. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَشْتَرُونَ بِعَهْدِ اللَّهِ وَأَيْمَانِهِمْ ثَمَنًا قَلِيلًا أُولَٰئِكَ لَا خَلَاقَ لَهُمْ فِي الْآخِرَةِ. That those who buy with the covenant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a small price, and something of dunya, they break Allah's trust because of getting something from dunya, a small price. These are the people who have no share in the hereafter. So as soon as the Sahabi heard this, he said, I'm not taking the oath, he can have the land, I don't want it. So he gave up his claim. He did not dispute. And note, the Prophet ﷺ clearly told the people, this is a lovely narration in regards to him judging between people. He said, I'm a human and you bring your disputes to me. Maybe one of you is more eloquent with his case than the other, and I decide in his favor on the basis of what I hear from him. So were he to receive anything that was from the right of his brother, he should not take it, because in that case I am allotting to him a plot from hell. Yani if you take anything unlawfully, this is actually, you're receiving your portion of hell with that land or that cloak. There was actually a man in the time of the Prophet ﷺ who appeared to be extremely pious before the Sahaba, and they had a high opinion of him. And the Prophet ﷺ then told them, and they were shocked at the punishment that he was receiving after he had died because of a cloak, one coat, garment that he had taken unlawfully, and that had become his means to hell. So this is huquq al-ibad. This is very serious. We have to make sure that we don't have anything of this. And this is very common in our Muslim countries, where the inheritance is now distributed according to the Islamic way, and people's properties are usurped. And we have this case in our family as well, actually. It's been about 20 years that certain people have not received their due share. This is huquq al-ibad. This Allah will not give up. He will forgive everything else except shirk, but this He will not give up until it is reconciled. And this also applies to halal food, to make sure that nothing haram enters our bodies. This is one of the shurut or conditions of the acceptance of your dua, is that nothing of haram goes inside our bodies. And if it does, then there's no guarantee that your dua will be accepted. There's a narration of Ibn Umar. There are 4 traits. If these are in you and you have nothing else in the world, they shall be enough for you. Those 4 traits are guarding a trust, telling the truth, good morals, and being particular in eating what is halal. These 4 things: guarding a trust, telling the truth, good morals, and being particular in eating in what is halal. And some people, when they acquire something haram, they want to give it in sadaqah. Somehow thinking this is going to cleanse the wealth. This does not cleanse that sadaqah, that wealth. It is not acceptable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is no reward for that. There was someone we used to know. He was known regularly for taking bribes, and he was rich. This is back home. He was rich and comfortable because he used to take bribes. Nobody knew that about him in the family. It was an open thing, extended family. And what he did when it came time for him to perform the Hajj is that he knew what portion was his salary, and he knew what extra, he would take his bribes. So he would, to go for Hajj, he used only his salary money that he was lawfully acquiring. He didn't use the money that he got for, bribe. So subhanAllah, there's this sense that money, there's no way to purify it except to give it back to who it belongs to and to repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to go, to leave that sin. There's no other way it can become purified and you do not receive a reward for giving it away. There's a narration, subhanAllah, very, very scary narration. It's attributed to the Prophet ﷺ. By him in whose hands rests my life. No servant of Allah becomes a Muslim unless his heart and tongue become Muslim, and until his neighbors become secure from his distressing deeds. One of the worst characteristics to have is to be a bad neighbor, is to be an annoying neighbor. There's a narration of Hassan al-Basri that once he became very sick and his neighbor came to visit him. And I believe it was a non-Muslim Jewish neighbor that came to visit him. And when he entered his house, he said, "Oh my God, the stench of the sickness has spread, beyond a tolerable level. It was smelling very bad in the house." And Hassan al-Basri didn't want to, tell him, what it was directly, but he said it's not the smell of the sickness. So the neighbor kept asking until he finally told him that actually this is because of a leak that's been dripping from your house for this many months. And the neighbor said, "Why did you tell me?" He said, "I didn't want to offend you. I didn't want to offend my neighbor." Because subhanAllah, the rights of the neighbors were so exaggerated in Islam, and so emphasized in Islam, that the Prophet ﷺ said, "I thought Jibreel would tell me that they have a share in your inheritance." This is how, subhanAllah, the rights of neighbors are emphasized. They're almost like family. They're about to inherit your they didn't, but that's how close it is. So this is very scary because we don't even know who our neighbors are, and notice in the story, he wasn't Muslim, his neighbor wasn't Muslim, right? SubhanAllah. And there's another story of Imam Abu Hanifa, it's attributed to Imam Abu Hanifa. He had a neighbor that was extremely annoying. He was a regular drunk. He would come intoxicated in the middle of the night and start singing when Imam Abu Hanifa was praying by he's praying the Hajj all night, he's either studying or worshipping. And he would come drunk in, and Imam Abu Hanifa could hear him, he's drunk and he's singing and he's very loud. And he would say things like, "Oh, they forgot about me, the drunk. Oh, they left me." He would say just things like that in his drunken state. One day, Imam Abu Hanifa didn't hear any of this noise. And he wondered what happened to my neighbor. So he went to check with the authorities that, do you know about so-and-so, what has happened to him? And because Imam Abu Hanifa was obviously known to the people, to the authorities. So they said, yes, he's in jail. He's been locked up. So Imam Abu Hanifa went, visited him in jail, got him out of jail, brought him back home. And then before he left him in his house, Imam Abu Hanifa asked him, "Did we forget about you?" That we didn't forget about you. So he had been hearing all that annoyance from him and all that loud noise and intoxication, but what did he do in response? He fulfilled his right of being a neighbor. He took care of him, even though he had been annoying him for so many years and disturbing his worship. SubhanAllah. And of course, that night was, a night of change and transformation for that man. He never went back to his ways because he just felt left out of society. That made him realize that, alhamdulillah, here I am with this wonderful neighbor. So, one of the very important things of becoming a true Muslim is that your neighbors become secure from his distressing deeds. And when a servant acquires the unlawful, this is the part we're talking about. When a servant acquires the unlawful and then gives it in charity, that is not accepted. And if he spends out of it, it stays deprived of blessings. Even if you use it, there will be no barakah. It stays deprived of blessings. And if he leaves it behind for his inheritors, it becomes his means for the trip to hell. Surely Allah Almighty does not help an evil wash off another evil, but He does help the washing away of an evil with a good deed. So this is the only way to set it right, is to give it up, repent. There's no way, so you see what the hadith teaches us is that you can't use it in any way that will make it okay. You can't give it as sadaqah, it's not accepted. You can't spend it on yourself, there's no barakah. You can't leave it for inheritors, it's going to be your way to hell. So there's no benefit, no way to use it. You just have to discard it, get rid of it, give it back. This is why we do not accept the interest that the bank pays us on our savings account. You know how they give you free interest on savings accounts? They have this at the end of the year. Just because you had your money with us, we're going to give you this much extra money. We say, no, thank you. We cannot accept that to give to sadaqah because it's unlawful to begin with. So there's no way to use it. We just don't take it. What we do is just have if you need a savings account, just open a second checking account and just know that that's your savings. Now, so in Islamic economics, the thing that is emphasized the most is the need for transparency. Everything should be completely clear, honest, and upright. This is the most important thing for Islamic point of view in economics and business and tijara and trade. Ironically, subhanAllah, in spite of the clear guidance we have in this field, in spite of these severe punishments associated with violating the rights of others, Muslim countries top the charts when it comes to the list of corrupt nations. I was looking up the top 10 most corrupt nations in the world. SubhanAllah, more than half, about I think 7 or 8, were Muslim countries. Number 1, Somalia, 99% Muslim. Number 2, Afghanistan, 99% Muslim. Number 4 was Sudan on the list, 97% Muslim. Number 5, Iraq, 95% Muslim. And number 7 was Uzbekistan, 96%. Muslim. Yeah, I was thinking about Pakistan. And that's why I checked in 2-3 places. I was like, Pakistan should be here. Yeah.
So these figures are coming from there.
Well, the figures of the Muslim populace I got from an independent source. So it wasn't that this is the most corrupt country and it's Muslim. The percentage of Muslims I got from an independent site, just from a geographical view. But this has been going on for years. And we only have to pay a trip, to any of these countries, visit them for a short while to really see that, this is not far-fetched. SubhanAllah, there's a reason why Muslims are in the state that they're in. They have left these guidelines. The level of corruption that has seeped into dysfunctional government and suffering people, there's a reason for that. Remember in the previous verse in Surah Baqarah, فَاذْكُرُونِي أَذْكُرْكُمْ, remember me and I'll remember you. Have we remembered Allah when it comes to our government, to our business, to regulations, to trade, to dealing with others? If we have not, then subhanAllah, what can we expect? Verse 189. People question you concerning the phases of the moon. Say there are signs to determine time for the sake of people and for the pilgrimage. Also tell them true righteousness is not that you enter your houses from the back. Righteousness lies in fearing Allah. So enter your houses by their doors and fear Allah that you might attain true success. Okay, here in the Arabic, they're asking about the phase of the moon. There were actually some Muslims, some Sahaba. In fact, Mu'adh bin Jabal was one of them. He was asking the Prophet ﷺ about what the changing phases of the moon mean. In the beginning, as we saw the hilal, the crescent shape. Then it grows bigger into Badr, the full moon, and then it wanes back again into what it was. What do these mean? In Jahiliyyah, there were superstitions associated with the phases of the moon. They would, according to the phases, they would take their omens, they would go on a journey if the moon was in a certain phase, or to get married if it was in another phase, business. All of these things they had superstitions associated with the moon. So here the Sahaba asked, what is it? What is the hikmah? What is the meaning of these various phases? Because obviously they had no scientific astronomical knowledge at that time, except what was given in the Qur'an. So they were curious about that. To someone who has no knowledge of science, it looks very mystical. It looks very, intriguing. Today it looks scary. Today it looks happy. Today it looks. So this was clarified by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that they are nothing but a natural calendar in the sky for people to be able to know what time of month it is. And that internationally, actually it's an international calendar because everyone can benefit from it. So Islamically, the way it was used until there was an actual calendar, an actual calculation that came later on, actual clocks. And what they used to do is that they would, for example, calculate when things were owed. For example, if someone took a debt, borrowed money from someone, they would say, okay, right now you're borrowing money from me, and it's a crescent, it's the beginning of the month. So when it turns into a badr, in about a week or so, 2 weeks, then your money will become due. So it was a way for them to estimate, to calculate, okay, how many days do I have, how much time do I have? Because remember, they have no calendars. They have no calendars, they don't know, what day, what time it is. So they would use it as a sign for, okay, now my debt is going to be due. Now this treaty is going to be, the treaty, for example, if they had with another tribe, okay, this treaty is from the beginning of this hilal that we see right now until the next hilal. So that would be like a 1 month's treaty. When women had to estimate their menstrual cycle, or the time of iddah, if a spouse died and they wanted to calculate the 4 months and 10 days, it would be 4 hilals, right, or 4 badrs that they would count from. So things like that actually was used for trade and harvest. And in terms of ibadah, the ibadah of Sawm is directly, the ibadah of fasting is directly related to moon sighting, and this is where we actually come into contact with the moon, right? Every year with our moon fighting, right? Moon sighting is when we realize the importance of the moon in our deen, right? But this is how it was for them. It was extremely important, and it was a marker in the calendar. And also for Hajj, same thing. When you would see the hilal 2.5 months later after Eid, when the Hajj sets in, they'll be able to calculate. So one of these superstitions that the Arabs in Jahiliyyah had, remember they used to perform the Hajj. Even before Islam in Jahiliyyah, the Arabs were performing Hajj from the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam, when the Hajj was first introduced by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and explained to Ibrahim. The Arabs were doing it from that time until the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But the superstition they had was, when they would put on their ihram for Hajj, they would not enter their houses from the front door. They would jump into the back, which is kind of silly, very silly, right? So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clarifies that, this is not piety. There's no taqwa in entering the houses from other than their front doors. So here, they would actually jump, they would go into the back or jump over the wall, but they wouldn't go in through the front door. It sounds kind of funny to us. So here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clarifies, true righteousness is not that you enter your houses from the back. Righteousness lies in fearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So enter your houses by their doors and fear Allah that you might attain true success. This is similar to لَيْسَ الْبِرَّ أَن تُوَلُّوا وُجُوهَكُمْ قَبْلَ الْمَشْرِقِ وَالْمَغْرِبِ. This is similar to, it is not birr to turn your faces to the east or the west. Qibla. Allah is not looking for superficialness, right? He's looking for real worth, which is in taqwa and in birr. Okay, let's go to 190. Fight in the way of Allah against those who fight against you, but do not transgress, for Allah does not love transgressors. So here, this is actually the first time that permission was given to the Muslims to be able to retaliate when they were attacked. Before this, they were not allowed to even fight back. Because remember, in Mecca, they were in an oppressed state, so fighting back would have been, like suicide. There was no way they could have confronted their oppressors. So, and Mecca was the time of patience. Now in Medina, when actually, a small state had formed, they were allowed to fight for the first time. This is when you had then the Battle of Badr and other battles they followed. But again, fighting is not for personal gain, it is not for wealth, it's for none other than upholding the cause. And only against those who are aggressive towards you first. People who are not bothering you should be left alone as well. They are not to be fought. So you have to understand this verse in this context, because a lot of times people like to nowadays pick and choose, take out these verses, fight, in the way of Allah against those who fight against you. You have to understand the context. It is not an open call to violence, okay? It is not an open call to violence. It is simply permission being granted to oppose those who actively oppose and harm you, because this permission was not previously granted. Previously, you just had to be patient. Now, okay, you're in a position where you can at least defend yourselves. And this specific verse was in relation to the mushrikeen, those mushrikeen of Arabia that had prevented the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba from entering Mecca after they had already put on the ihram for Umrah. Once you put on the ihram for Umrah or Hajj, you have to complete the Umrah or Hajj. And if you don't, you have to make the qada. You have to make it up. Just like you would miss a salah, a fard salah, you would make it up. Even though Umrah is not fard, according to most of the scholars. Imam Shafi'i considers it wajib. But even though Umrah is not fard, if you put on the ihram for Umrah, and then for whatever reason, sickness or any other reason, you cannot complete it, you have to make the qada. So here this verse is talking about fighting those who would opposed you and not allowed you to enter into Mecca to perform the Umrah after you had put on the ihram and you were coming from Medina with this intention. What happened? The Mushrikin stopped them. They said you cannot enter Mecca. So they were in charge of the Kaaba, right? They're in charge. They said the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba being in charge. This is why Allah says that these people cannot be in charge of the masajid of Allah. We've been through that verse. This is why they're not even allowed within the boundaries, because they have no place being there. They can only cause harm to the believers that are trying to fulfill or finish their acts of worship. So here, what happened? They said, okay, you're not going to go into Mecca. Rather, we're going to have a treaty of Hudaybiyah. This is the 7th year of the Hijrah. And what that treaty of Hudaybiyah allowed was, okay, you can come back next year, perform your Umrah. We're going to give you 3 days. We're not going to bother you. You could do your Umrah in peace. So here Allah is saying that even now, when you return the following year, according to the treaty, and you have which guarantees your 3 days of peace in which to perform your Umrah, even if you feel at this time they're not going to honor their treaty, they're still going to oppose you, they're still going to bother you, then you can fight them. This is the specific context of the verse. This is who it's talking about. Very important to know this, so that no one can come up with this claim that, oh, your Qur'an says fight. That's not what it's saying. It's not an open call to fight whoever is not Muslim. Okay, this is one of the most misunderstood verses. And we are in the greatest need perhaps today of clarifying this misconception. So, you need to know that this is what was going on, and this is the specific circumstance, specific defined permission for that. And even in war, subhanAllah, even in the state of war and fighting, we have such strict ethical guidelines that it's hard to find in any other form of warfare. Specifically, the Prophet ﷺ instructed them that when there is full-blown fighting, you cannot cut trees, you cannot, of course, touch women or children, you cannot even kill people of other faiths that are devoted to their faith, like monks or priests. You cannot even kill the workers of non-Muslims. They're not in the fight. They're not involved in the fight. They're not acting aggressively towards you, even if they're non-Muslim. Even if they're employed by non-Muslims, you cannot touch them. There is no mutilation. And compare that to how war is carried out today. SubhanAllah. When we had the use of the first nuclear bomb, first atomic bombs that were used in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we all know the story. The remnants of those deformities are still continuing throughout successive generations. How long has it been? How many years have passed since that incident? SubhanAllah. Something that continues, and so many countries today, SubhanAllah, like Bosnia, filled with landmines. Children cannot play in their extended backyards. Their backyards are like gardens. That's how Bosnia is a beautiful country. They cannot go out without seeing these signs, landmines. And if they were to go there, they get blown up. And you see children being tossed in the air and coming back down dead because of these, destructive forces there. So subhanAllah, if you compare, and it's not just methods. Of course, the methods that we have today, we didn't have back then. The technology we have now, we didn't have back then. But it has definitely become inhumane. So there's no way that we need to feel defensive in this regard. We are the ones that have the ethical, moral, strict guidelines. And you can't even cut down trees. No environmental damage. You're supposed to minimize damage to the environment, even in such a full-blown state of aggression. Okay, here's the verse that is really quoted a lot. Kill them whenever you confront them and drive them out from where they drove you out. But here, subhanAllah, even within the verse, you can tell it's talking about a specific place, about specific people, because it's saying drive them out from where they drove you out. This is understood as, just fight them the way they fight you, kill them wherever you find them. This is how it's understood. It is talking about these specific mushrikeen in that specific circumstance who were driven out, the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba from Makkah, and then when they returned, they would not let them enter and perform the Umrah. This is talking about those people. وَالْفِتْنَةُ أَشَدُّ مِنَ الْقَتْلِ. And fitna is worse than fighting. This is a reason given for permission. is because fitna is worse than fighting. Fitna, yani persecuting people, oppressing people to the point where they are not even allowed to practice their religious beliefs. To live in this state becomes unbearable. And because of that, permission was given to fight. Now here, fitna of, and also what the Tafseer mentions, the fitna of shirk. The fact that the shirk was going on in Mecca at the time, that the Kaaba was filled with idols. The first house that was built for Allah, the fact that that was filled with idols and shirk was a greater fitna than anything else that had to be taken care of. So anyhow, there's no concept of revenge while fighting. If you're fighting lawfully, then it cannot be motivated by revenge. Once Ali was fighting with another person, and he had him under his sword. Okay, the enemy was under his sword, and he had complete control over him at that time. He could have done what he wanted to do. But what happened was that the enemy spit on Ali, right? And as soon as he spit on him, Ali left him. He moved back. He left the enemy, he was no longer under his enemy. He was shocked, like, what happened? So he said that when you spat on me, I became so angry that I wanted to harm you out of my anger. It was no longer motivated for Allah. He said, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to act out of my desire for revenge and anger. It had to be only for the sake of Allah. That's why I left you. So subhanAllah, these were people who had immense control over their nafs. These people had mastered all the stations of tazkiyah that we struggle with day in and day out. So they were controlling their nafs was not in control of them. So, again, no, it cannot be motivated by revenge for anything else other than upholding the cause, which is to spread peace. That's really the purpose. The purpose, just like today, we have Operation Peace, Operation Freedom. We're going in for democracy. We're going in for freedom. We're going in to liberate these people. That's what we hear, right? So that's really supposed to be the reason behind fighting. Fighting is a necessary evil only to stop oppression, only to be able to establish peace. That's really the purpose of lawful, permitted fighting. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wants us to return to peace as soon as it's possible. As you can see from this verse, do not fight against them near the holy mosque unless they fight against you. But if they fight against you, kill them, for that is the reward of such people, such unbelievers. And if they desist, know well that Allah is ever forgiving, most compassionate. If they desist, and if they stop, then Allah is forgiving, most merciful. Keep on fighting against them until mischief ends, and the way prescribed by Allah prevails. But if they desist, then know that hostility is directed only against the wrongdoers. So again, realize that the purpose of law and fighting in such circumstances is for the purpose of spreading peace. It's for a greater good, to bring about ultimate peace. That's the only reason. Here, 194, the sacred months, for the sacred month sanctity should be respected alike. Thus, if someone has attacked you, attack them just as he did to you, and fear Allah, and remain conscious that Allah is with those who guard against violating the bounds set by Him. Okay, Asharul Haram wa Basharul Haram. So, one of the concerns that the Muslims had in fighting these people was that they were in a sacred month. The month of the Qa'dah, which is right before the Hijjah, the month of Hajj, is one of the four sacred months in Islam. So fighting, of course, fighting against people, of course, is prohibited in the sacred months. You can't even kill a bird or an animal in the precincts of the Haram in the sacred months, or at any time. In the Kaaba, fighting or killing even an animal is forbidden at all times in the Kaaba. In the sacred months, it's forbidden everywhere, altogether. So they were like, the Muslims were like, how can we fight them when we're going for Umrah and it's a sacred month? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, well, this sacred month that you may have to fight them if they prevent you, permission is being given to you in return, in retaliation for last year's sacred month when they prevented you. Because remember, they had also prevented them in a sacred month from going to do Umrah. So because of that aggression that they had showed to you the previous year, in the sacred month, you now are allowed to do that against them if need be, if they act aggressively, if they prevent you. And by the way, these months are, the sacred months are 4, the Hajj, the Qa'dah, Muharram and Rajab. These are the 4 sacred months. And they have been sacred since the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam. They've always been the same. So fighting, murder, any violation, completely haram in these months, so that the pilgrims can go about in peace in the Hajj months. But of course, we saw that the Arabs had started to desecrate these months. They had started becoming violent in Jahiliyyah. In these months, they would actually even have robberies, full-blown robberies. And what they would do is, if they wanted to, rob the pilgrims in that month or rob anybody in that month, they would say, okay, since we violated a sacred month, we're going to make up for it by making another month sacred. And that month was never sacred, because you can't make things, okay, this is a holy day. You can't make it up yourself. Allah has to declare it holy or sacred for it to become that. So here, they were given permission to retaliate for the previous year. Okay, inshallah, I hope that's clear. These are the very difficult verses that are very hard to understand because of the way they've been made controversial and distorted and quoted out of context in our world today. So it's really important that you understand what was going on, the reasons for revelation. Okay, let's go on to 195. Spend in the way of Allah and do not cast yourselves into destruction with your own hands. Do good, for Allah loves those who do good. So here, of course, spending for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we are encouraged to give sadaqah beyond the mandatory zakat, because no cause can go forward without material support for that cause. So this is just the way the world goes around. There's no money, the cause will stop. So always remaining conscious of that. 196. Complete Hajj and Umrah for Allah, and if you are prevented from doing so, then make the offering which is available to you, and do not shave your heads until the offering reaches its appointed place. If any one of you should have to shave your head before that because of illness or injury to the head, then you should make redemption by fasting or almsgiving or ritual sacrifice. And when you are secure that he who avails of Umrah before the time of Hajj shall give the offering that he can afford. And if he cannot afford the offering, then he shall fast for 3 days during Hajj and for 7 days after he returns home. That is 10 days in all. This privilege is for those whose families do not live near the mosque. Guard against violating these ordinances of Allah and be mindful that Allah is severe in punishment. This is the most difficult verse to understand in regards to, if you don't know what it means, it's hard if you don't understand what it means in regards to the Hajj and the Umrah. And inshallah, we're going to clarify this verse. Pay attention, because you're not going to understand. What I just read is not understandable to me if I didn't know the tafsir. There is no way that I can understand what it really means just by reading the translation. So first things first, Hajj became fard or institutionalized, legislated in the 3rd year of the Hijrah. Okay? So this is talking about Hajj. It became legislated in the 3rd year of the Hijrah, and this verse actually allows you to combine Umrah and Hajj together when you go for Hajj. The Arabs in Jahiliyyah used to think that you cannot do Umrah and Hajj in one journey. You have to make 2 separate trips to do one for Hajj exclusively and the other for Umrah. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that actually you can combine the 2. This is one of the eases that things Allah has made easy for us. Now, what happens if you are put on the ihram for Hajj and Umrah, and then you cannot complete your Hajj or Umrah for whatever reason? You have to make a sacrifice. Okay, this is what the ayah is talking about. Now, it says that the sacrifice has to reach its place. You cannot shave your heads until the sacrifice reaches its place. Why is it talking about shaving the heads? Because shaving the head is how you get out of ihram. Why do you want to get out of ihram? Because you can't complete your Hajj or Umrah for whatever reason, so you have to get out of ihram, and that's by shaving your head, but you can't do that until the sacrifice reaches its place. Why do I want to get out of ihram? Because there are so many restrictions in ihram. You can't, you can't have relations, you can't wear perfume, you have to make sure you can't cut your nails and hair, all these restrictions apply. So a state of ihram is a state where people generally want to get out of after completing. It's for the purpose of completing your ibadah, and then you want to be relieved of having fulfilled that. So you need to understand the sequence, and then you will understand the verse. What is going on? You're in ihram for Hajj or Umrah. What happened? You couldn't complete it for some reason, whether you're sick or someone stopped you or plane, has to stop for a week in this area, whatever happened. Now, how do you get out of ihram? By cutting your head. Not cutting your hair. For the men, it's more reward to shave your hair, and if not, you can trim it. But of course, there's more reward in shaving your head, right? So I encourage Abu Zayd to shave his head, even though I love his head. But anyway, that's besides the point. So basically, what you have to do is you cannot shave your head, which will take you out of ihram. Why? Because you have to sacrifice a goat first, or a cow, or a camel, whatever's available. Now, what the verse is, the verse assumes that you know all these things. The verse is speaking to us as if you know all of this, right? So this is why you have to understand that what is meant by the sacrifice reaching its place. The sacrifice reaching its place, according to Imam Abu Hanifa, has to reach the haram. That's the place of sacrifice. It has to reach the haram or the boundaries of the haram. So you may be stuck in an airport in Frankfurt, but you have to arrange somehow for your sacrifice, according to Imam Abu Hanifa, to be done within the precincts of the haram. So if you can't do it, you can authorize someone else to do it for you, right? So the other Imam Shafi'i, Imam Malik, they think that you don't have to have the sacrifice done within the bounds of the haram. You could even do it wherever you want. So that's an ease. That difference of opinion is actually an ease. Or you can send the money. If you can't actually have animal sent, then you can arrange for the money then they can do the sacrifice with that money on your behalf. Now, what happens here? If you look, let's look at the verse. Look at the translation while I'm going through the verse. وَأَتِمُّوا الْحَجَّ وَالْعُمْرَةَ لِلَّهِ فَإِنْ أُحْصِرْتُمْ فَمَنِ اسْتَيْسَرَ مِنَ الْهَدْيِ. And you cannot shave your heads until the hadi, the sacrifice, reaches its place. Now you know what that's talking about. فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ بِهِ أَذًى مِنْ. This is the next part. What if you cannot wait for the sacrifice to reach its place? Or you cannot make the sacrifice, you can't wait to shave or cut your hair until the sacrifice has been made because you're sick or because there's some problem in your head, and you have to get out of ihram, you have to shave before the sacrifice. Then what do? You can even do that, but then you have to do siyam, fasting for 3 days, or sadaqah for 6 people, or a sacrifice. Okay, so fasting or sadaqah or a sacrifice. Nusuk is sacrifice. Okay, look at the ease at every level. Subhanallah, how many options there are. You're supposed to do Hajj and Umrah. Okay, I can't do it. All right, then just make a sacrifice. Okay, can't do the sacrifice. Okay, then fast. Can't fast. Okay, give sadaqah. Can't give sadaqah. Okay, then make the sacrifice. Subhanallah. Any later on you can do that. You don't have to do it then and there. You can do it later on. فَإِذَا أَمِنْتُمْ فَمَنْ تَمَتَّعَ بِالْعُمْرَةِ. Now, so that was the first part. I hope you can understand that now. If you read the verse, inshallah, it should be clear. فَإِذَا أَمِنْتُمْ فَمَنْ تَمَتَّعَ بِالْعُمْرَةِ إِلَى الْحَجِّ فَمَا اسْتَيْسَرَ مِنَ الْهَدْيِ. The next part is then when you are able to complete the Hajj and Umrah. For those people that it becomes possible for them to complete their Hajj and Umrah, then they also have to make a sacrifice. Right? All Hujjaj have to sacrifice, right? So, what if a person who is performing the Hajj cannot make the sacrifice for whatever reason? What do these people do? This is a different category, okay? These are people that are going to perform the Hajj, and you have to do a sacrifice in Hajj. But if you can't do it, then what do? Then you have to fast 3 days during Hajj, and 7 days when you come back home. And these 3 days that you have to fast is within the Hajj days. So by the 9th of the Hajj, because the 10th of the Hajj is Eid. So Hajj is technically over. So the days of Hajj are up to the 9th of the Hajj. So these 3 days of fasting you have to complete in the days of Hajj, which means you have to be done with 3 days of fasting by the 9th of the Hajj, the month of Hajj. So then 7 when you come back home. So there's a total of 10 days of fasting associated with people who cannot make the sacrifice when they're performing the Hajj. Now this is for those people that don't live within the haram. This ease has been given to them. And subhanAllah, why do we make the sacrifice? Why is sacrifice legislated? It's actually to show gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for having allowed us to combine the two acts of ibadah of Umrah and Hajj. Because previously it was thought that you have to come back again separately on a separate trip to make the Umrah. That if you're doing the Hajj, you can't do Umrah with it together. These have to be independent journeys. This was the conception. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clarified that you can in fact combine these two ibadat, which is a great mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you get both done together. Hajj al-Tamattu, right, it's called. And just show gratitude for that blessing of permission from Allah. You're supposed to make this sacrifice. And this combining of the Hajj and Umrah, it's only for those people that don't live within the Haram boundaries, okay? For those that are able to, that live within the Miqat, for them it's very easy. They can combine the Hajj and Umrah. They do Hajj by itself, and they can come back and do Umrah whenever they want, because it's easy for them to do that. So here, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala end the verse with? وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ شَدِيدُ الْعِقَابِ. Fear Allah and know that He is severe in punishment. Yani, don't be lax in what Allah has legislated. Take the ahkam and the fiqh that is behind the ahkam, take it seriously. Pay the fidya what the fidya is due. Pay the sadaqah when the sadaqah is due. Make the sacrifice if you're required to make the sacrifice. Whatever becomes binding on you according to your situation, make sure you do that. Do not become lax. Do not think that it's not a big deal. Do not think it insignificant. Make sure that you, it says, وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ, fear Allah, وَعَلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ شَدِيدُ الْعِقَابِ, indeed He is severe in punishing. And for all the ahkam, Surah Baqarah has many ahkam in this whole surah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us over and over again. So many times, وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ, fear Allah, because there's so many ahkam associated with that. And there's actually a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that for everything there is a sanam, there's a peak, a height of everything, and a culmination, something that's the most important thing in an object or in a thing. And he said that the sanam of the Qur'an is Surah Baqarah. The sanam, meaning the peak, the culmination of the Qur'an is in Surah Baqarah, because of all the ahkam and the details and the guidelines. And Surah Baqarah was revealed after 2/3 of the Qur'an had already been revealed. So you really had over the about 60-70% of the Qur'an was already available, had already been revealed, but that's after that Surah Baqarah came down, and it was the culmination. So inshallah, with that we will end at verse 196. Subhanallah wa bihamdika la ilaha illa ant, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.